everyone, today's going to be a quick look at the Pro WS TRX50 Sage Wi-Fi A. This board is, I wouldn't want to call it a refresh, but it's pretty much a revision of the existing Pro WRS TRX50 Sage Wi-Fi. Now, these boards are kind of similar in looks, but that's about it. It's actually pretty different in terms of layout and the things that you do get with the board. So consider it as a different variant. This is being released in lineup with the Threadripper 9000 series. This is probably not available at this filming of this video, but most likely available very shortly. I would say probably a week or two from probably when you see this video, if not already, depending on your region. All right, so let's quickly get into it. This was sent to me by Asus, so it's going to be a little different. You might have slightly better packaging than what I received. This is not a retail unit, from what I can tell. All right, so we'll take the board aside. Let's quickly look at the included items. In the box, you're going to get a quick start guide, Asus Control Center Express QR, which we'll get into in this video. I'll show you how that works. And you'll get some instructions for the VRM DRAM fan bracket. This is for a fan that's included. Well, I'll show you guys in a bit. This will help cool your memory. If you have heat sinks on your memory, it's probably not going to be a big deal. But yes, DDR5, especially in these type of applications where you have high capacity DRAM, temperature will come into play, especially if you're running, with the new Threadripper 9000s, we're looking at support for 6400 rather than I think the 5600 is on the 7000 series. All right, but we can get into that a little bit later. So quickly, let's take a look at the components. You do get the accessories. You get that VRM fan bracket that I was speaking about, but no fan. You will have to buy your own fan. All right, this fan bracket only helps you just kind of secure it into place. Additionally, you'll get a PSU 3-pin to 24 adapter cable. Although this is more like a 4-pin, but there's 3 wires, so I guess they call it 3-pin, but it's a 4-pin adapter. I'll go into what this does in a bit, so I'll put it on the side. So you get 2 SATA cables, I believe, right? And then you get some bump pads. These pads are to help keep your M2 your M2 NVMEs supported. For M2 NVMEs, if you only have a single-sided NVMe, then you don't need to use those. I mean, you can choose to use those optionally. If you have a double-sided, do not use these. All right, it will put the NVMe way too high. Then you have some more NVMe clips, a temperature probe, more of the optional bumps, Q slides for the NVMEs, and your Wi-Fi antenna, and a display port pass-through. The way this is going to work is that you're going to, I'll tell you guys when I get to the back of the board actually. One end will go into your GPU, the other end will go into the motherboard, and then that will allow you to pass video through the USB-C connections on the back. All right, and you get your front panel connector, and I picked this up earlier, right? So that's pretty much what comes in the box from accessory point perspective. Let's just get this back together, just put it on the side here. Okay, so with that put to the side, let's take a look at the board itself. Right away, it will look somewhat familiar to the previous boards, especially the TRX50, TRX90 that was released for Asus from the 7000 generation's Threadripper. Now, we'll start from the very top. You'll have a CPU, EPS, and then you'll have 8-pin PCIe for CPU, and then you'll have another PCIe for CPU, and we'll go into why that matters later. And then you'll have another, I believe this is a regular 8 EPS, and then you'll have your pump fan header for your AIO. Then you'll have your water pump, whatever maybe you choose, your CPU optional, CPU fan, your 24-pin, your USB-C, and here's the 4-pin. This 4-pin is actually for this adapter cable that I spoke about earlier. This comes into play if you're trying to run dual PSU configurations. You can run dual PSU configurations with this board, same way as you could for the other boards from the 7000 series. The way this works is, ideally, you're going to want to use 2 PSUs of the same capacity and the same model. Technically speaking, that's what they want you to do, but you can actually probably get away with not doing that, but I would suggest you doing that, because in most scenarios, that's is what's done. We use identical PSUs. And then here you have a 6-pin PCIe and an 8-pin PCIe, right? And then here we have SlimSAS 1, I'll call it SlimSAS 1, a USB 3, your Force Zeta, and your SlimSAS 2. And then down here we have the front panel, and then we have a BCM header. This is for your IPMI cards. It's kind of an out-of-band network management card expansion. And then here we have your, I can't really tell what that is in here. What is that? Your front chassis header detection, along with your temp sensor, and then your untune mode switch, 2 USB 2s essentially, your RSVD, which is for Asus use only pretty much, and then the slow mode for untune, channel fan, another channel fan, a retry button. These are kind of tied into overclocking now, right? The retry button, the safe boot. This is for if you want to save your BIOS settings, but then you want to make a fix that may have caused it to post fail. You can do that. And then here you have a flex key, which is by default going to be your reset, and your start stop button. All right. And then here you have your serial header. Okay. And then here you have your front panel audio. And I'm not too sure what this one is over here. That might be the TPM. Oh, there's another channel fan here. So this, or is that the TPM? Oh, so the TPM module is over here, the TPM connector. So I'm actually have to check on the manual what that is over here. I'll put a small line inside the video. And then on the back here we have your BIOS flashback, USB 2 BIOS, and then you have Wi-Fi 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, USB 10 gigabits. This is your DP pass-through, 1 and 2. Your clear mouse, 10 gigabit USB, 2 more of them, and the USB 4. This is also, so you see it says DisplayPort at the bottom. This also can be used for pass-through, and your 2.5 and your 10 gigabyte LAN. Now, I'm a bit surprised it's not dual 10 gigabit. That's a little bit. I don't want to say disappointing, but I would have preferred that for a workstation product in these days. Now that we've kind of gone over the board, let's quickly talk about the overall I/O and so forth that you will get on this board. This is going to differentiate a little bit depending on whether you have a Threadripper 9000 or Pro or 9000 non-Pro. Same goes for the 7000 series. For those of you that don't know the difference primarily being the Threadripper Pro series will support up to 128 PCIe 5 lanes, and the non-Pro will only support up to, I believe, 48 lanes. And that is going to differentiate what's going to be working and not working on this board. Additionally, Threadripper Pro gives you access to 2 terabytes of RAM support, which you're not going to be able to do on this board because there's only 4 DIMM slots. Right as of right now, the highest capacity you can achieve with 4 DIMM slots, I believe, is 1 terabyte. And that's actually extremely expensive. That comes in at about $13,000 to $14,000 on average. Maybe a little bit cheaper for a lower speed kit, but around $6,000, I think. 6,400 is about $13K. All right, so it's definitely workstation grade items. But with that said, let's quickly break down the lanes here. Okay, so I'm going to quickly remove the NVMe cover. It's a 1-clip operation, which is very nice. So you don't have to play with screws individually like you did before. This obviously you guys have probably seen on the, I think I showed it on the, regular ROG boards as well, on the Hero. This is kind of in the Extreme. They've kind of done this now. But okay, I digress. So right over here, you'll see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4. All 4 of these lanes are X16. It's not like before you had a mixture of 16 and X8. Essentially, the top 3, which have these, I forgot what they call it, it's like safe remove or something like that. Safe slot, yeah. These are going to be Gen 5, and the bottom one's going to be PCIe Gen 4. Now, you'll also notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 NVMe slots. Now, these slots are going to be varied in speed in terms of Pro or non-Pro. So if you have a Pro CPU, these are going to run Gen 5. If you have a non-Pro CPU, they're going to run Gen 4. Because, like I said earlier, the amount of PCIe lanes on Pro versus non-Pro CPUs. All right, in addition, you'll notice that we had talked about there's SlimSAS 1 and SlimSAS 2. Now, for SlimSAS 1, this is actually shared with M2 and 3, which is this one. So if you populate this, you're going to lose this. Okay, SlimSAS 2 and M2_4, this NVMe slot, both of these require you to have a Pro CPU in order to function. So if you have a non-Pro CPU, these two are pretty much essentially not going to function. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is kind of a balance, right? Therefore, you don't technically have to buy the WRX90 board, which in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to be much different price-wise, but that is a much larger board if you bought a Pro CPU, as the WRX90 boards only support the Pro CPUs. Okay, so that pretty much covers the expansion on this board. Let's quickly talk about the dual PSU configuration I alluded to earlier. Depending on how you set this up, you're going to be using, if you're using one PSU, you'll see that over here it says you're going to connect the ATX 24-pin power, and you're going to connect PCIe 8-pin power and PCIe 6-pin power, which is these two over here. So you're going to be 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then if you're going to do the others, you're going to have to connect the rest. Now, from what I've seen on the previous board, I believe that depending on the core count, although it's not in the manual, you may have to plug in additional ones. If you're running, say, a 64 or the 96, you may require more than just these three. But I think the BIOS splash screen will tell you which ones to plug in. Do not plug in just the 6. Do not plug in just the 8. If you're using these, plug both of them in. They also suggest that if you want to power the GPUs, use PSU1, the primary, not PSU2. Okay, and this obviously, this end will go into your 24-pin on the PSU for PSU2, and then it will come into here. Okay, I think that's just to override it so you can then, well, I mean, it's not only sense it that there's a connection there, but allow you to run the 8-pin and so forth from PSU2. Okay, so that's pretty much where that ties into. And with that said, let's quickly just bring in the last generation boards. We're going to take a look. No, I keep saying last generation, but it is still current generation chipset, just so you guys can kind of tell the difference here. All right, so on the previous one, you'll notice that it's a little bit of a different shape, but we also had two 24 pins. We had some different power options, right? The 6 and 8 were all still on the side, but we have different kind of layout for the power. We could actually plug in both 24 pins. Okay, but I guess that's been changed a little bit. Now, I'm not too sure why that's been changed that way. It's just the way it is. And you also see that the VRM on the top has been removed, versus here it still exists. And you also notice that I almost forgot that we still have this ARGB header at the top now. Was there an ARGB header on the last one? No, so now we gained RGB, yeah. So we also gained RGB with this one. I kind of feel like, to a certain extent, these boards are somewhat of a balance between when we had, say, I don't know if you guys remember a while back when we had the X399 ROG boards and the X399, I think they may have had a TUF and a Prime for the X299, and actually, I mean, the first generation or second generation Threadrippers. They had all these boards, and then I guess from a cost perspective, because the CPUs went up so high, that they didn't feel the need to make the boards in that lineup anymore. But you see that these still retain the original style of, screws for NVMe covers. But you'll notice here, this is what I was talking about, was that you have that kind of improved slotting, right? So you have your top slot, your second one, but here I've always found it, these three are essentially the same, but then this slot really wasn't necessary because some of these were just X8. I don't remember what they were off the top of my head, but it is essentially, I think from a price perspective, it's pretty much going to be about the same. But yeah, you do get USB 4 on the new one, which you did not have on this one. But they are both the same Wi-Fi 7. And so if you have this and, if there's nothing on this board you're particularly looking for, then this is still going to be very serviceable. So with that said, let's get this into a system. We'll just kind of see it running. I'll show you guys the Control Center Express as well. And we'll take it on from there. Here we have the board inside the system. In the beginning of this video, you saw a quick B-roll of this system as is. Quick rundown of what's in here. Here we have a 1350 watt power supply in this section, which you cannot see. We're using an EKWB magnitude Threadripper block, which is probably the best Threadripper block that was ever released. Unfortunately, these are discontinued, and that EK situation is a whole other situation. I think Optimus also stopped making them. So right now, your best option for water cooling these CPUs is going to be there is an AIO. So Thermaltake, Silverstone, they do make 420 AIOs. as well as the 360 version. Those are essentially the same. BitsPower also has a 360 I/O, but I think they're trying to work on a new one. With that said, if you're doing custom loop, your best option next up is going to be the heat killer, which is still manufactured and readily available. That has an excellent block, maybe just 1 or 2 degrees behind this magnitude. But moving on, so we have the board in here, and we also have some, I think this is just the 64 gigabit kit that I test with. I do have obviously higher capacity kits, but I'm not going to waste it on, test setups. But with that said, additionally, we have a 5090 Astral. I think most of the folks buying this board are going to be gearing towards the HDT segment, because in here, while I do have a 64-core Pro CPU, ideally you want to run this board with a 32-core. I mean, that's better for daily use, and for this chipset, I think most people buying the higher core counts are going to be buying the WRX90 board, just simply because you have... I mean, it's very niche usage at certain points where multi-GPUs may be leveraged. And at that point, you're better off looking at a full-blown water-cooled box and not something like this. But other than that, there is a PCIe Gen card here with 4 NVMEs on there. Obviously, I can still slide another one right here, right? So you could technically run, with the Pro CPU I have here, 4 onboard, 4 and 2 add-in cards. So that's like 12. So that's quite a bit of storage. Obviously, then you still have SATA ports. You still have access to one of the slim SASs if you don't populate that NVMe board on the NVMe slot on the board itself. So I think for someone that wants something attractive, small as HDT, gaming and workstation, video editing box, whatever you want to call it. Well, a combination of all those things. You shouldn't build this thing for gaming. It's ridiculous. But I think this is a good setup. If you're, even this board, even if you have the Pro CPU, like I said, it still works out for that. Although I did speak to Asus and asked some questions about this board and its kind of segmenting between the other board. And this board is, I don't know if it's going to phase out the other one, but I personally still like the older version. So if you can get that, get that. They're going to be pretty much the same price. Other than that, it's quick layout. Oh, I keep digressing. For the bottom, I have 3 140mm fans doing an intake. And at the rear, it's actually an exhaust. This is a 420 radiator on the rear. It's a slim rad. You can't see it. But also, heat also rises. So I do have some hot air coming out the top as well. And for those curious on where and exactly my pump is running, I can show you guys from the top. So just let me bring the camera up and show you guys how I'm running the tubing. All right, so here we go. You can see the top here. This is pretty much a very simple, basic loop. Some of the fittings don't match. It's not exactly the most aesthetic thing meant to be. I really did this in under 2 hours. The whole entire thing, just put it together real quick. I did just 3D print this plate here just so I can run the pass-throughs. You can see that this is actually a DDC pump reservoir. It still has air bubbles in it, as you can tell. But this is a barrel one. This one is super small and super slim, which is why I like it. They do last a very long time. I've had them. I have one of these in a small system that's been running for over a year. Pretty reliable. As you can see, pretty much just directly out into the block and coming right back out, going to the rear radiator, coming out. I have a temp sensor and a drain fitting here, which doesn't match. And then for here, you see all your IO cables is just come right here and go out that rear hole, right? Which is right here, the rear hole. But I do have a right angle power supply just to make this easier. The case does come with one, but it doesn't support, I think, what are these, C19s? I think this is C19. It doesn't come with a C19 one, so I just bought one of these on Amazon. But yeah, higher power capacity power supplies, usually 1300 watt and above, are going to be required to use this connector instead. Just slightly different. But yes, so that is pretty much the layout here. So if you're wondering where the pump and everything is, that's it. Super simple. The top slides on and it's like nothing's there. So with that said, let's quickly look into the BIOS. I just want to show you guys the BIOS, and then we'll talk about something called Asus Control Center Express, which is one of the, I guess, benefits for those of you, the guys that have maybe a small business, or you have a kind of a shop where you have multiple systems running Asus Pro Workstation boards. I've seen some videos on it before, but they all kind of suck. So I'm going to just quickly go over it myself. All right, so we'll move on. So we're in the BIOS. While this does not look very fancy graphically speaking compared to the consumer boards, this, for anybody that works in the server world, workstation world, this is actually pretty much what you're expecting to see. At the same time, you're actually getting the exact same features as you would on the ROG boards inside the BIOS, right? You have N2 mode, you have all the specific settings, even Tucker's Paradise is here, right? You can set your performance bias and clocking per core, right? And voltage settings per core. All of this stuff is what you would expect on an ROG, Apex, or something like that. It's all still here, right? You have additional things that disabling things inside, right? You have advanced overclocking, and you have your fan speed monitors. This is going to be the same configuration as you would with the regular Asus boards, right? Everything down to the chassis fan, and you can also turn the heatsinks fan. Those two VRM heatsinks on the motherboard, they do have fans on them. You can change them over here. Although I find them pretty quiet, even under load, and with a 64 core processor, I didn't really hear them. And you also have, profiles. You do have IPMI tab. I don't have the add-in card. This card is sold separately, so you will have to buy this card and then plug it into. I think there's a header for it, and then there is one of the X1 slots on some of them, but it is an add-in card that is sold separately. So unless you have this, it's not going to work. And what this card does is it allows you to power cycle the board for example, if the board is actually off, the system is off, you can actually control it with this. For those of you that work in corporate, you might be used to something like the Dell Lifecycle controller. This is something similar to that, right? You can also, manage your UEFI from it. It also does fan control for a couple fan headers, but this is definitely a separate add-in card that you will have to buy. Okay, so with that said, let's just exit this real quick, and then we'll just take a look at the Asus Control Center Express that I was speaking about earlier. So let's quickly go over Control Center Express. What you're seeing is actually a virtual machine. It's not the box that's running the Threadripper build, because what you need to do is you need to have somewhat of a central control server. Now, it can be on the same box as the actual system that's being managed, but in this case, I'm choosing not to do that because there are some things you have to take into consideration. So I'm just going to quickly run the setup. It's going to do some quick pre-checks, right? It's going to reach out to the internet if you don't have these things installed, and this is why you're going to get a lot of these prompts here. So it's going to install a couple of these prerequisites, and it's going to have permissions to install every single one of these. There is the latest guide on the Asus website from 2023, but that's it here. You're going to have to pick. It's going to need a database. It's going to recommend MySQL. The reason why it needs a database is because all the information, for each system, etc., needs to be stored somewhere. So it's going to have to create a database. So you can just do MySQL and just hit proceed. I haven't tried the SQLite option, but obviously that's assuming you have something else set up. But the overall instructions does not cover any of that. So it's grabbed it online. You're going to hit install. At this point, it's going to install those prerequisites. And once this is done, it's going to take a little bit. So right now, it's creating a local database from MySQL on top of this. So here, quickly just pay attention, right? As you install this, keep in mind the ports that are listed here, because these are the ports that are going to be most likely blocked by your firewall by default, and you're going to have to allow those. Now, this is what I was going back to saying. If you're running a small business and you just have a work group of computers, you're going to have to go around doing this yourself. If you have a small business, most small businesses, I think within, probably have something like Windows Server Standard, or they have something, I don't know, they have a bunch of thin clients that connect to Azure. You can do these firewall settings online in your Microsoft environment pretty easily. Why do I say Microsoft environment? Because Asus Control Center Express, it does not support Linux boxes. It actually only supports Windows boxes based on the Realtek protocol that they're using. I forgot that chip. I'm going to put it at the bottom, but that only supports Windows as of right now, and I don't think it's changed. So these are also the ports, KVM port, broadcast port, MySQL ports. These are all ports you should kind of keep in mind. They're in the manuals, so it's not going to be something that you're going to forget. But once you just clear this here, it's going to finish installing. And once this installs, you're going to be brought up to the UI. I haven't done the full install process, but I've kind of seen some videos of what it looks like. So I haven't actually used it, so this is my first time as well. Why would you use this? That's a good question. Like I was saying earlier, if you have multiple boxes, this is one way to manage the software, firmware updates, etc. across those boxes, as well as see their current status. And I guess if you have the IPMI add-on card, you have some other options to control them. In the corporate world, we have other tools, like, we have, the Microsoft Azure Control Center for a lot of things, right? We also have things like System Center, right? These are not cheap tools by any means. And for those of you that are smaller businesses, smaller companies, you might use things like PDQ Deploy, PDQ Inventory. I don't think this is going to be as robust as that, but it is a free option nonetheless, right? Every board comes with some type of, let's see, here we go. And by default, I think the account administrator and that password is admin. Obviously change this, right? And here you can see that it's, all right, you know what? Let's just minimize this. You can see that there's absolutely nothing, right? So we have to configure this. So first thing, we're going to come into options here, and you can see that you obviously can use SMTP to send emails, alerts, and so forth. Obviously, this is something you want to set up yourself. I'm not going to go into all of this. If you're doing all this, generally speaking, you should kind of have somewhat idea what you're doing, right? And you can have rule lists, but obviously, this is for the SMTP emailing, general configuration, themes, settings, and your license. Now, every single board will come with a card, and that card will have a license. And while it's not explained too clear, I believe that you need a license per device, right? Unless you can buy a multi-license key, which I'm not aware of, because once again, I've never used this thing, and we don't, in all the enterprise environments I've worked in, we don't use this, simply because we have so many other tools, right? So you can hit add key, and for this one, I'm just going to add that system that's sitting right over there. So just let me come back with that key added. All right, so once you have it installed, you're going to have to push the agents onto every single box. All right, this is going to be similar like everything else in the network related for management. If you come here to the network tab, you can hit scan. It's going to pick up everything on that subnet or network or VLAN or whatever you want to call it that applies to you. It's going to do some slight fingerprinting, so you're going to get the Linux and the Windows, etc. But obviously, this is not going to work, right? Type local. That's not going to work because unless you have a work group set up, similar passwords on every single box and accounts, this is not going to work. So ideally, this would be in a domain infrastructure of some kind, right? And then you could do manual installation, where essentially you're manually installing the agent at every single box. We're probably going to do that because I don't want, let's see, I guess I can open the ports, right? So if I can see, it's just one box. So you can see right away, this is not going to work if I just hit deploy. That 100% is going to fail. You can see, I should see why in a second here. As far as launch PowerShell, and I do a test net connection to 192.168.50.25 and specifying port 10636, it's going to 100% just come back with a fail, right? And you can see here, it actually says fail to deploy. Check your network or firewall settings. Not only is it that, it's going to be an account related issue, as I was specifying earlier. So this is taking way too long. I was just done telling that. Okay. But so what we'll try to do now is we'll try to open up the remote port 106.306 and make sure it's actually open. Does it need to be open locally? Let's see, on deploy port. So remote desktop port. So technically we need to open 636, 637, 638. Okay, so we're going to open those ports and try again. You can see that this is all false, right? Failed to connect. Okay, so let's open those ports right now. We'll just go to Windows Firewall. Obviously, I may have to open it on this control box as well. I have to see which ports are there. But remember earlier, I had specified the KVM also requires a different port. So this will be the time for you to configure all the necessary ports that need to be opened. What I've done is I've did the manual install of the agent, simply because you really want to have network accounts set up properly for this, and you can come do that under settings, right? You can add the actual account, right? Like ideally a domain account or some type of network account, and you can also obviously change roles, as I was saying earlier, if I didn't mention that. But here I did the manual install for that. You do have to make sure the firewall ports are open, as well as the remote service management service is running. But it does use that as a dependency. So if that's not running, you're gonna have run into issues. But yeah, I took a quick look at the manual. It's actually pretty detailed, not pretty good documentation. And you can, as long as you set it up correctly, like this local install with the agent, all I had to do is put the IP address of the management box, and then it popped up immediately. And if I come here, I can take a look at this box. You can see a common hardware sensor. I can see all the information on this box. Like, for example, I have nothing plugged in the CPU fan, which is why it's giving me the 0 RPM, right? You can see I can check utilization, right? This is actually more in depth than a lot of, well, I don't want to say, I guess it's like, you know, depending on what you're used to using. So you can do software. A lot of this, technically, if you had you could do a lot of things with PowerShell scripts, but this is a nice interface, right? And control, right? You can turn off USB devices, remote desktop even, right? So there you go. There's the remote desktop. And we'll just click out of that. So here, and then you can even put remote BIOS update. You can update the BIOS file. You can even boot to the BIOS directly, which is something you couldn't do normally, right? Tell the machine to boot to the BIOS. And then device manager, right? You can see all your installed devices. This is going to hang a little bit for sure. So, but yeah, not too bad, right? Device manager. You can back up BitLocker keys, which I did see in the manual mention. And if we were to, you can also run reports, right, of all the boxes. And here, if we change the layout, the view, which I was trying to do earlier, but essentially what you need to do is you need to like draw a photo, or not draw a photo, draw a picture, or have like some type of network diagram where everything is. And then from there, you can kind of just put computer icons and, you know, kind of have a layout of where you want it to be. I only have one box, so there's no point doing any of that. But once I select this, or I'm going to get out of this, you can create groups, obviously, of certain things. You can search for item, but I only have one. So like I said, there's not much to do because I only have one. But if we come to select function, you can see that there's a lot of stuff, right? We have account management, we have firmware updates, we could do system restore points, system trap alerts, firmware updates, USB redirection. Interesting. And let's see. I don't have IPMI card, so that's not gonna. Can't do any of that. But what settings? Device does not support MC. I'm not too sure what that is. You will have to kind of go through the manual to get a hang of all this stuff. But I did see software dispatch as one of these things. So if I come to software management, let's take a software dispatch. Here, I guess you can download an MSI or exe, all right, put it there, and then script files. The setup format, see, must be a zip MSI file. So I'm questioning is, how do you put in the parameters for an MSI or the toggles? I guess you might have to specify that with the script file. All right, so I guess inform me when the script successfully sent to the client completes setup. So I guess the script file probably ties in with the setup file. So for example, if I was pushing Adobe Acrobat, I would have a configuration file as well. So it may not work for everything. So yeah, you're gonna have to play with it, but you can create a software pool. This stuff, obviously, software dispatches is going to be easy or hard depending on the software you're trying to push. So let's see, what else can we do here? Screen broadcast. What is that? Can I broadcast something to every screen? Is that what it's saying? Is that what it means? Screen broadcast. Oh, okay. So I could room name. Oh, what is this? So this is me. So let's just say test room. Broadcast target. Display zoom, muted, quality, create a broadcast room. So I guess then that person can share their screen with everybody else. That would be pretty interesting. Test room, right? Display size, max stream video. Interesting. The video codec needs to be installed for broadcast. Please install the... All right, so once again, a lot of this is going to require some manual, like reading the manual. But overall, I think it's pretty cool. I think for BitLocker Sync, 3 minutes ago. Okay. So I think it's for, you know, if you're running a small shop, you don't want to pay for stuff, like, or you're running, like, even I guess a decent sized shop, 50 to 100 boxes or more than that, and you guys run all Asus workstation boards. I'm thinking they have pre-builts, right? So they have pre-builts with the Asus workstation boards inside, and you have an all Asus, maybe not. I don't know if this works for server. That'd be interesting. But if you have all Asus workstations, you could definitely add this to your existing management software that you use, or you're, home enthusiast where you have like, I don't know, like 8 boxes, and you don't want to run around doing Windows update on every single one. Well, actually, that's kind of what Microsoft kind of pushes to a certain extent now. But okay, I digress. But you can do a lot of things across all your boxes, simply. You can also update BIOSes like on every single box. So this is definitely pretty robust for a free program. Now, I did notice, like, I don't know if I mentioned it, there is a phone app for this, but like I said, I do not recommend you using any remote management over the cloud unless it is extremely secure and you have ideas of how everything along that supply chain is secured. Otherwise, you run into a lot of issues like solar winds and all that good stuff. So with that said, let's do a conclusion on the board itself. I think this board is supposed to, like I was saying earlier, it's supposed to kind of replace the Wi-Fi Sage A. I'm sorry, this is the Sage A. So it's supposed to, oh goodness Christ, I'm gonna scrap this VM afterwards. So it's supposed to replace the TRX50 Sage Wi-Fi. They're saying that, but I don't know how true that is, because I've also heard that it's supposed to coexist with this board. Now this board is $899 now. It came out at, I think, $1,000, but this Wi-Fi Sage A, this board, well, this video is going to go a little longer than I expected. All right, so the Wi-Fi Sage A, this board that we're looking at, is at a Asus store of $999. So it's actually costing more. But from my understanding, this is not because this was the intended price point. I think tariffs and logistics currently kind of attributed to this price because it was supposed to come in lower than $1,000, right? And because the other board's on sale now, right? That's why it's $899. So from a layout perspective, if I were to come to overview once again, it was just, I know we went through this in the beginning of this video here, but I think that the spacing on this board is better. And even though the other one just kind of has similar spacing but more slots, you get the 2 slim SAS, which I think you only had 1 on the other one. So there are some improvements, but the 2 slim SAS also requires you to have a Pro CPU. But meanwhile, I don't know. I say the board is like a balance of a Pro CPU owner and a regular HDT owner. But the one downside I've noticed on this board is this. You've gone essentially from a 36 stage to a 20. So that's a big difference. Now, how much does that really matter? For most folks running a 32 core, it doesn't matter at all. But it's something I like to point out. But with that said, I think the board is very serviceable. I personally have ran the Wi-Fi Sage WRX90 for the past year plus without a problem. I ran the Wi-Fi, the non-A, the other board without a problem. Overall, it's a decent board. So if you have the other one, you probably don't have much of a reason to come to this one unless you're looking for specific things like rear USB 4. That's one thing I did notice. While the first non-A model has a USB 4 header on the board, from what I read online, it actually doesn't really work out too well. Even when you put in the add-on card for USB 4 and you plug it in. So if you want USB 4 on the back, this is the board to get. If you want to run 2 slim SAS, this is the board to get, assuming you have a Pro CPU. So with that said, thanks for watching, guys, and stay safe and take care.